Welcome to our Lunchtime Live program on WJEJ. It's a partnership with Washington County Public Schools the third Thursday of the month at this time. This is Will Kaufman from the Public Information Office, joined by Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Clayton Wilcox, for our half-hour show today. Today's show is sponsored by Blackboard on a mission to reimagine education. Sir, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good to have you back. Big Teacher of the Year soiree last night.
Absolutely.
I understand an actual dinner and recognition broke out at one point.
At one point,
Other than that, a little less than formal at some parts of it.
It was pretty terrific last night. Morgansville teacher Kyle Dingle was our Teacher of the Year for 2016. His table actually came with huge poster-sized pictures of Kyle when he was announced not only as the winner, but even previous to that as a candidate for finalists. They jumped up, stood on their table, stood on their chairs, and waved it around. It was quite a night.
Now, just for the record, it's not as if that kind of effort sways like judges on site. All of this was decided coming in. So,
it had been decided.
I mean, it's not the energy of the crowd that wins it for him.
No, yeah. But this event over the last 5 years has become more and more a celebration of great teaching. And quite honestly, all the teachers who come, even in support of their colleagues, are really Teachers of the Year in my mind. They're just a great group of teachers. We said last night as we looked around the room that in Washington County right now, there's a bit of a renaissance, if you will, of just great teaching going on. Teachers who care passionately about their kids, teachers who are energized, teachers who work long, hard hours to make sure that great things are happening for their kids.
We'll make the point to get him in next month, which is what we typically do, getting the Teacher of the Year as our guest the following month. But I've heard the word passion described in his teaching style. And I think across the county, as you described, there's a lot of difference when you assess teachers. That's a component to the better ones, the best ones.
I think that's true. What's interesting to me is I think all teachers care about their kids, but there is almost a tangible level of extra care, extra commitment in some of these teachers that are being recognized by their colleagues. And I think that's probably the most important thing for me to note right now is that oftentimes these teachers that are being recognized as the Teacher of the Year of their school are being recognized by their colleagues who they themselves see the gift that these teachers have and the way that they share that gift with kids.
We had a set of finalists, but we also had dozens of folks who were nominated in the process. So it's not as if there isn't some recognition and certainly some effort on the part of either fellow teachers and educators or the community to note the fact that they have favorite teachers all over the county.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we began this process with well over 40 nominations. Right. It was very, very tough for the selection committee to go out and pick that final group of 5 or 6 teachers. They did it, but I will tell you that the judges that I spoke to last night said that was just an excruciating set of decisions to winnow it down. They said it was actually easier to pick the finalists than to create that final group.
How do we know when young people are going through their education, student teaching, getting into their first year or two, theoretically starting a career in education? How do you know the folks who are going to succeed at the level that Kyle has, that other folks have? How do you know the folks who are going to have that passion? Do they have it? With those folks who are coming out of college as very young people in the industry?
I think when you've spent some time in human resources like I have, or you've spent time in a school and you have a good sense of how schools should feel and how kids are energized and excited, that you start to know the people that can contribute to that. You get a feeling right away, but then you have to measure, do they have that deep content knowledge? Because a lot of really good people out there. But, sometimes good people don't have a lot to offer other than their goodness. So we go through a fairly sophisticated interview process where, we like and meet the person. We have multiple people talk to the person. We try to get some sense of who they are academically. We try to look at some sense of, were they a contributor in their college environment, in their high school environment? Because the one thing that we know is behavior predicts behavior. So, if you were engaged and excited, then you're probably going to be an engaged and excited teacher. But if you're somebody who comes in and, you're dragging the drama llama around, if you kind of look like Eeyore, then, you're probably going to bring that to the workplace. And that's really not something that we can suffer.
We talk a lot about, as we are now, about young people coming into teaching and those first years of their career, and maybe they do have that passion. We hope so. How about on the other end of it, how about veteran teachers? What do we do to support veteran teachers maintaining that passion? What do they do? What do we do to support them?
I really think more often than not, that's an intrinsic thing. That's not something that I can give you. I can't give you passion. I can't reignite your passion. But we can create conditions by which it's probably easier to soar than it is to go the other direction. I think we do that through our professional development. What's interesting is we're having this ongoing debate right now in the system about is our professional development worthy of the teacher's time, given all the other demands of their time. We've tried to challenge our professional development team to make their work more meaningful to teachers. But at some point, it's a kind of a 50-50 proposition. You got to bring something to that event as well as get something from the event. So, it's just difficult. And, I was going to say last night, I pulled some of my remarks back because it was a celebration, not an opportunity for the superintendent to kind of preach to people. But, I think at some point it's fair to recognize that teaching has never been harder than it is today. I think that kids bring more challenges, parents bring more challenges. The workplace brings more challenges in the sense of standardized testing that perhaps we didn't have 20 years ago. The front page kind of notoriety of performance results, people measuring achievement gaps now in ways that they never did before. The preponderance of new special education cases and those kids being infused into a traditional classroom as opposed to being pulled aside. The fact that we have more kids who weren't in school 20 years ago than we do today. Our graduation rates now are over 95%, but the graduation rates had roughly tracked the decades through the 50s and 60s. So what that really means is that today there are about 45% more kids in school than were during the 50s. A lot of people remember the good old days, but the good old days weren't good for everybody. A lot of young people didn't finish school, but they had the opportunity to go work in a factory, whether it was Mack Truck at the time or Fairborn or something like that. That doesn't exist for a lot of kids today, so they have to stay in school because otherwise life circumstances are very, very hard for them.
It's funny that we're talking in terms of somewhat of a challenge presented by having more kids stay in school longer.
Yeah,
I mean that's the ultimate goal is to graduate them.
Well, it's a great problem to have, but I think there are oftentimes people who judge our success by what they see today, but they don't really remember the day that they were there the way that it was. Right. Many of the listeners right now perhaps went to school and they think, well, everybody went to school. Well, no, they didn't, because if you graduated in the 50s, only about 50% of the kids who began with you in primary school actually graduated and walked across the stage with you. That's a historical fact. Now, it's a national statistic, so it may be a little bit different for this community, but not so much so, because that's how statistics are made.
There's no way to take any of those challenges you just listed off of the table either for the current teaching staff.
I don't think so. But, here's the thing, Will, that I, try to say, but sometimes it falls on deaf ears. There isn't a career today that isn't more difficult than it was before. Those careers that perhaps didn't change much are now being automated. They're being taken away by technology. You talk to professionals today about, or talk to construction company owners, and they talk about the rules and regulations that they have to operate under. You talk to doctors about the way they have to operate today. It's much different than it was 20, 30 years ago for everyone, not just for teachers. So, we're not lamenting the fact that we are teachers. We're not lamenting the fact that we're administrators. We're simply saying it is tough. We recognize that, but let's pick ourselves up and let's go.
I'm talking with the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Clayton Wilcox, on our Lunchtime Live program today, which is sponsored by Blackboard on a mission to reimagine education. The Teacher of the Year is a celebration. The budget process, not much of a party.
Not much of a celebration, no. Yeah. No, not much money left for candles.
And it's been back and forth, as it usually is.
Right.
This feels like a more challenging budget year. Is that accurate? Or?
Well, I think it's more challenging in the sense that this is the second year in a row that we've had a decline in enrollment, and the rate that we get compensed for the kids who are on free and reduced lunch has stayed static. Right. Yet our costs have gone up. What most people perhaps don't know is that we're really funded on a per-student basis. So the more kids that come, the more resources we have. When we're flat, if our labor costs are going up, we don't have more revenue to deal with that. So it's a challenge. The board also asked the administration to put forth a budget that they thought was the most appropriate budget. We looked at our employees. We looked at the effort, just that we were talking about a moment ago. We realized we had to create a salary resource pool that not only funded perhaps the step increase, but maybe something a little bit beyond to kind of push them forward relative to their peers across the state. Because it is true that people tend to select places to work based on compensation, so we want to offer a fair, competitive, regionally competitive compensation package. That said, the budget that we asked the county commissioners to fund was $4.9 million more than the revenue that we were scheduled to earn. We had hoped the commissioners would engage in an earnest conversation about that, given that they were going to get new money. But that conversation just really didn't happen. Instead, messages were sent back and forth between groups. And, there's no blame here. There's no angst. There's no anger. But we're going back now. The board has been in workshop to right-size their budget given the revenues that are available. So they're looking to reduce our operating expense by about 4.9, almost $5 million. The problem for board members is they don't work with it every day, so they don't really know how to get at it. Some of the board members want to take one-time revenue, fund balance money, and apply it to an ongoing cost, or they want to use that money to give them some time to make the decision. But the reality is, if you use it to kind of ease the transition, then it's not there for you later. So there's a lot of challenges that our board members are facing right now, but we're going to help. That's what they pay us for, and we'll give them, I think, a number of good options that they can choose from in early May.
What is your role? Because you present a proposed budget to the board, it ultimately becomes the board's budget to work, and yet now it is their budget, but they're making cuts, but they have to come back to you and yours in order to formulate the ideas for cuts and changes?
Well, the board at this point is the board's budget.
Right.
They asked me to recommend a budget. I do that in consultation with all the other administrative team members of the district. But I'm the board's only employee. So when they look at the budget and they realize that we've recommended a budget that doesn't have the appropriate revenue, they have to come back to me and say, Superintendent, please help us craft a budget that allows us to live within our means. We're not a taxing authority, so we can't just pass the difference off to the community. We simply have to right-size our budget. So the board has said to me, go back with your team. We've looked at it. We'll present the board probably with two fairly different ways to get there. One that kind of relies on some of those one-time expenses being trimmed out of the budget. One that takes a more careful look at salaries and salary increases and perhaps pushes that number down a little bit for all of our employees, but still respectfully, hopefully, funds a portion of what the employees expect and hope to get.
There were a couple of notable proposed positions in the original proposal. Where do they are they in jeopardy at this point?
Well, one of the things that the board had challenged the school system to do was to improve our minority recruiting. We have a significant fraction of our kids who are African American or Latino today in the system, and quite honestly, if they look in their classrooms, they rarely see somebody who looks like them. And so the board said, rightfully, go out and try to find some other African American educators, go try to find some African American administrators, go try to find some Latinos, go try to find some people who help our kids see themselves as professionals. And so we put a couple of positions into the budget that would help us to do that. Those positions will likely go away. Perhaps one might survive. We've had more specialized transportation requests for our kids, and so we had looked to add a transportation routing specialist to help us make sure that we were able to pick up and transport kids more efficiently and effectively. Those things don't just happen. We have over 22,000 kids. We transport or have eligible for transport probably about 18,000 of those kids the way this county is laid out. So we have to have a key staff and key staff members to do that. Beyond that, there weren't a lot of new positions, but what we were trying to do is we once in a while have staffing anomalies where, you don't fully anticipate, for example, that Cascade Elementary School is going to have 32 kindergarten kids, and so you can't have one teacher with 32 kindergartners. You need to put another teacher up there, and so we had 10 contingency positions in the budget too. So those are the kind of the specialized positions that we had.
You don't seem to be suffering in any great way, even though this is a challenge at this point of the process. I mean, I don't see you breaking into a cold sweat.
You don't see me at home kicking my dog and things like that. No.
Yeah, exactly. However, I mean, those are pretty big numbers. I mean, almost $5 million worth of moves needed to be made. I mean, that's no pocket change.
No, it's a difficult number, particularly in a budget of our size, because what people don't realize when they look at our budget is that 85% of every dollar that we take in from the county commissioners of state goes to salaries and benefits for our employees. So we really don't have a lot of discretion because we're contractually obligated to support our employees going forward. People don't understand that. But, Will, one of the things about being a superintendent of schools, particularly someone like myself who has been in several places, I've had large operating budgets before. When I was in Pinellas County, Florida, we had $1.6 billion in budget. Of that, $1.2 billion were operating expenses. So I've dealt with large numbers before. I was a senior vice president of a large corporation in the United States, the second largest publishing company in the United States, 10th largest in the world. So I've had experience with budgets. It doesn't make sense for me to run out and start nickel and diming the organization. It makes sense for me to think more strategically and to work with the team members who this board has entrusted me with to make right decisions.
What's the time frame?
I think that we have to have a budget together by mid-May, because July 1 starts our new fiscal year. But more importantly than anything in this whole process is right now we're engaged in contract negotiations with our teacher unit. We're engaged with our support employees and quite honestly with our administrative team as well, although that's a little bit different process. I think those people have a right to know whether or not they're going to get a compensation increase. They have to make family and life decisions, so we want to get this done in a timely manner. But quite honestly, those negotiations may get held up through the summer as we work on this.
How do you feel about presenting negotiations in the public eye?
Initially I thought that it would be a really good idea. I tend to think that it's something that might just be the way of the future, but I'm not sure that kind of old school negotiator that I am, that I fully appreciate it yet. I've probably got to grow into it. I think that it makes for more honest conversations, but right now people are struggling with that. People are saying, well, wait, I can't say what I want to say. Right. And we just have to learn and develop a civility to allow us to say hard things, but say them pleasantly, to have disagreements but not be disagreeable. And right now I think there's a lot of that. Both sides, we're still a little bit disagreeable.
Not just in negotiations.
No, probably not.
Words to live by, not just in negotiations.
No, yeah, in all things, all things.
If you're just tuning in, this is Lunchtime Live on WJEJ, a partnership with Washington County Public Schools, the third Thursday of the month at this time. Today's show is sponsored by Blackboard on a mission to reimagine education. My guest today is Superintendent of Washington County Public Schools, Dr. Clayton Wilcox. The Academic Hub is sort of back in the mix, sort of back, a little bit more buzz as these months have progressed. When we've talked, some months ago, dead in the water was closer to a description than where we are now. Where are we right now?
Well, first of all, it's the building that was formerly known as the Academic Hub. I don't want to channel Prince here, but I do want to say, we've talked a lot about, is it the Learning Commons now? What is it? Right. Honestly, for me, the name isn't important. What is important is the opportunity to provide an urban education environment for our kids where they can be closer to the internships that will allow them to learn about the world of work. And that means downtown, I believe. I think, parenthetically, something good that happens is when we have more kids on the street, we have more parents that come down to see their kids. It's good for downtown. Right. But we've not pushed that because, quite honestly, my board took the recommendation that I made that we pull back because the community wasn't ready for it. I think what the community wasn't ready for was the funding mechanism. How are you going to do this? I think nobody really argued the educational aspects. I think people get small learning communities. I think they get having kids engaged in education, particularly their own kids. But what's been going on is the county commissioners at their State of the County discussion said they had a grand vision for downtown. Greg Murray, their executive director, has been championing that vision. He's been working with our delegation. Delegate Wilson and Senator Serafini have been meeting with people across the state. And there is some new life going. Well, I think what you'll see right now is that The Maryland Theater is much more engaged in a conversation about what they can do to enhance the front side of the theater and perhaps some of the back of house operations as well. I think that they're feeling rejuvenated because Senator Serafini, Delegate Wilson, the city council, and others are willing to infuse some new dollars that they didn't anticipate before. We've got a number of local benefactors who have recently said, you know what, if the county and the city are going to work together with the school board, we'll support it. I've had some meetings with the developers of the project that we were going to use. They're enthused. The plan is back together. They're willing to modify that plan. So there's a good momentum going right now, but the truth will probably be known in, I would say, the next month and a half, because that's when some funding decisions are going to get made. And my sense is the county commissioners at some point will meet with my board to talk to them about this vision in greater depth. Right now, as I said, there isn't a project, but we hope that there is, and all the elements are there.
Right now, nobody is sitting by late night lamp poring over designs and architectural drawings and things. It's none of that right now.
No, it's none of that right now. But I think a lot of people who are close to this have some thoughts in their mind that they'd like to see to come to fruition, but I think there's a lot of bridge building that has to take place. I think there's a lot of discussion that has to go forward, and I think there has to be some coalition building that takes place where people that were against see the reasons for doing it, and to see that it is affordable and see that it makes sense. And then we hope to be a partner. One of the partners that I didn't mention that I think is probably one of the most important partners to this is the University System of Maryland. Quite honestly, they're doing some great things with this work right now. And Mark Halsey, who's the executive director, has been engaged in that. Some of the vision that the USM Advisory Board, I sit on that board, that they have for new programming through the university system will drive some of this construction.
It's funny when the topic first arose and all the peripheral topics then continued to blow up. All of a sudden, not that it was necessarily needed because of the excellence of the school, but all of a sudden, this championing of Barbara Ingram sort of organically grew and then multiplied and multiplied. I mean, people were showing up at meetings and making comments, and you saw social media comments and all of that. All of a sudden, Barbara Ingram got this sort of re-energized quality about it with no other project in any real terms around it.
Well, it's true. First of all, Barbara Ingram was a great school on its own, but I think what people saw was the opportunity to expand the footprint of Barbara Ingram or Barbara Ingram-like programs downtown was really a powerful idea. And I think that resonated with a lot of people. I think that's why you saw some of that. It's really exciting. You know, Barbara Ingram was the 15th highest rated high school in the state of Maryland last year. What makes that number so magical is that the kids are selected for Barbara Ingram not based on their academic talent, not based on their coursework, but they're picked because of their artistic talent along one of the 5 domains. But these kids then use that spirit, that artistic spirit, to become great students. It's a really powerful mix, but I think it's a lesson for us as the public school system that when kids are engaged in something they care about, whether it's radio, whether it's art, whether it's drafting, whether it's mechanical engineering, whatever it is, they will do things that will amaze you, and sometimes they'll do things almost in spite of you.
And I think you see it at the other schools too, out and around the county. It's not just focused on Barbara Ingram, because there's that mix of academics and arts, academics and athletes. There are some great kids involved, some really bright, very talented kids who aren't coming from rich backgrounds. There's no elitism about that.
No. I think we all know. I mean, I'm 60 years old, and I think I probably represent a group of people who can point back to people that they went to school with, who stayed in school not because they were great students, but because they were engaged in band or orchestra, they were engaged in football or basketball, or they were a great basketball player, and that's why they went to school. And today they're very successful adults because they stayed in school. I think that's what Barbara Ingram represents, an opportunity for kids who might not be tightly connected to public schools to be connected, and through that they get a great education. The 15th highest rated in Maryland, and it's very hard to pick between number 15 and number 5, let me tell you.
Are you an early voter by any chance?
Yes, I am.
Did you already vote? Is that right?
I voted. This election is very, very important to me.
Yeah. What does this election mean from top to local?
Well, I think, when you take a look at the presidential election, one of the things you look at is what's going to happen to public schools through the Department of Education from a federal level. I think we've moved recently from a lot of intrusion into the day-to-day operations of state education agencies, and then kind of everything runs downhill to local districts. So I think we're in a much better place with the new Education Act. I think with the right leadership, we will keep that federal involvement at a minimum. I think that's a good thing. I think at the state level, a similar thing, Governor Hogan has really, I think, sent clear, strong signals through his recommendations to the state school board about what he expects. I think locally, and that's where all education really happens. We have an election that's going to help to define that as well. I think we have a number of people who are running who bring a business perspective that is perhaps a little more entrepreneurial, which I think is the direction of education today. We have some people who are running who perhaps don't have that same perspective. And so, my hope is that people will educate themselves on the issues. They'll kind of take a look at the trends of today, and they will vote based on the future as opposed to the past. Because, this is one of those things where you can't steer the boat by looking at the wake. You really have to kind of look ahead at the headwaters. Where are we going? We're using technology in new and different ways. We're having integrated curriculums. We don't just teach math in isolation anymore. We don't just teach science in isolation. The world has changed, and we're having to change with it. So we're hoping that people will pick people, whether they're from education or the business community, that have a future-oriented vision.
This isn't nearly as fun as it could be if we would just espouse our own opinions on candidates and this local election. But in the spirit of fairness, there are 4 contested seats on our Board of Education, on a 7-member Board of Education. The primary is Tuesday the 26th. And out of the list of candidates, there are 9 names on the ballot. 8 of those names will advance to the general election then in November, and 4 will be selected on election day in November.
Yeah, well, you've described it wonderfully. And quite honestly, I think that one thing that's really concerning to me is that there is one candidate on that list who said, I don't want to be I'm pulling out, I don't want to be a part of it. Yet you have a member of our local delegation who's trying to have her drafted. I think that's problematic. When you have somebody who says they don't want to serve, but they're then being put in a position to knock somebody out who says they do want to serve, I think that's a challenge for our community. I would hope that former candidate would come forward and say, you know what, thank you very much for your support, delegate, but I don't want to do this. I think that's fair, because absent that, it's almost a stealthy candidacy. I don't want to say it's unfair, because it is our process. Right. People know the rules. But I would say that I think it does a disservice to the process in some ways. Again, I'm not the one who said I'm not running. I'm not the one who said any of that. So I'm simply, and I'm not reporting, I'm just kind of relaying what I've been told and what I've read in the paper.
Do you think we encourage young people enough, including our students, to pay attention, to get involved, even at the voter level when they become age eligible to vote? As a school system, do we do enough?
No, I think we should do more in terms of education. I think we should do more in terms of educating. We can't advocate for anybody to vote for a particular candidate, but I absolutely think that we should do more to advocate on behalf of, here are the issues, here are both sides of the issues. I think we should encourage people to get registered to vote. I think we should bring voter registration right into the public schools on the student's 18th birthday. Our democracy depends on an informed electorate. I mean, that's really the purpose for public schooling in this country. I think we've shied away from that in the name of political correctness, and I think we have to do a better job.
As always, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Before you sign off, I want to tell you.
You got more?
Well, I
don't have any additional questions. So
I only want to say this before Phil cues up the music and everything. I understand yesterday that Lou Scally was talking about doing something downtown shirtless, and Tom Rayford I just wanted to say
I'm not even party to this.
I know you're not.
I should have signed off.
But the loyal listeners are, and I just want Tom Rayford and Lou Scally to know that we did this interview today shirtless, and we expect them to be doing it tomorrow.
Right. I now have decided I should have signed off and not given you the final word. Superintendent of Schools Dr. Clayton Wilcox on our Lunchtime Live program today, sponsored by Blackboard, on a mission to reimagine education. Join us the 3rd Thursday of the month at this time, a partnership between Washington County Public Schools and WJEJ.